Hello, my name is David Brett. I'm the editor of the New Westminster Times. I'm coming to you again from Sapperton Landing in New Westminster with breaking news out of Powell River, BC. At last night's City Council meeting, that's February 5th, 2026, the Council passed a motion to delay any further steps towards the changing of the name of the city until after the October civic election. So there was an amendment made to the motion where the city could do some work on what a possible engagement strategy might look like. But for all intents and purposes, the name change juggernaut has ended until the election is over. This should be considered a significant victory for the opponents of the name change. It's not an absolute victory because there was no vote of council to drop the name change idea completely, but with the passage of time, the energy and sort of the air in the balloon of the name change movement seems to be quickly seeping out and stalling out. Now, it should be noted that the Tla'amin First Nation that had asked for the name change in the first place because they found the namesake Israel Powell's to be objectionable, were pushing for the City Council just to ignore the democratic process of having a quote-unquote opinion poll, which was set to occur simultaneous with the October 17, 2026 civic election. They didn't want to vote at all. They wanted the city just to kind of ram it through, and well, that's not happening. So this is considered a significant victory, but the City Council meeting wasn't without some hijinks, and we'll show you some video in a minute about there were police involved and there was somebody escorted out of the building, and we'll show you that in a minute. But first I wanted to give you a little quick snapshot of background on how Powell River got to this point in the first place. So after the 2022 civic election, the council majority was basically in favor of the name change. They were supportive of the nation's desire to see Israel Wood Powell's name struck from the city, and some other name, as yet undetermined. The name Tisquat was floated as a possible name. But after the election, the council came out with a series of priorities, and it was decided that in 2026 there would be this opinion poll, but preceding that there would be a robust civic engagement with the people of the town, consultation process. Well, here in 2026, in January, it became evident that they had completely run out of time. The robust civic engagement never occurred. There was no big meetings or surveys or anything else proceeded to further the name change. So they realized that the sand had run through the hourglass, and they didn't want to be engaging the city on the name change whilst they're knocking on doors, campaigning for re-election. So here's the thing about this big civic engagement plan. They had already done a civic engagement. I've got a copy of the first few pages of a report of a joint working group that was published in 2022. So it is rather strange that they were waiting on an engagement process when they'd already done an engagement process. Well, a lot of the people in the town thought that this process was completely flawed, and it didn't really wasn't really a listening exercise. And I'd like to just read a few things from this to give people a snapshot. So what happened is around early May 2021, in a meeting, the Tla'amin sprung the question, would you consider changing the name? We don't like this guy, Powell. It's very objectionable and hurtful to our people. And the city sort of went on a process. So the May 12th meeting where this happened was just, less than 2 weeks ahead of the Kamloops mass graves press conference that set the country on fire, literally. Churches burning down across the country, flags at half-mast, all of this concept of genocide, Canada Day canceled in communities across the country, this massive paroxysms of guilt, and this resurgence and explosion of this genocide narrative. No pride in genocide. So how can you be proud of Canada when Canada is like the Nazis, basically, who committed a genocide against the Indigenous people? Well, now, of course, similar to the name change, the air is starting to deflate out of the Kamloops narrative because the credibility of the claims regarding the GPR anomalies and the lack of ground truthing, and why aren't they ground truthing it? What happened to all the money? It is just becoming somewhat of a proposal that lacks credibility. So I wanted to read you a couple of things from this July 2022 Joint Working Group report. So after the name change, they struck a working group and they did all these meetings. But I want to talk about some of the lessons learned from the Powell River situation, what the people did and how they were able to successfully kind of quash this name change plan. It's not completely quashed, but it's getting there. So what I'm going to read to you from this report is quite astonishing. And it kind of gets at the fundamental underlying battle that's going on here. It's not completely as meets the eye. So the opening of this report, which was prepared by a consulting group, and this is key. A lot of the city council motions by the woke politicians, they hand off the work, the spade work, to consulting organizations who themselves are captured DEI organizations who have themselves quite radical worldviews. So what do I mean by radical? So the report, and I'll just read what it says about the request from the First Nation. They say, this request was made in light of the increasing social awareness of the truths of colonialism and the harmful legacy the actions of Israel Powell has had and continues to have on the Tla'amin people, and get this, and because the continued commemoration of individuals involved with colonialism undermines the dignity of all Canadians. Let me read that last bit again. Because the continued commemoration of individuals involved with colonialism undermines the dignity of all Canadians. So you can imagine, this is supposed to be a consultation engagement with the citizens to see what they think. This is the thing about consultation that people need to be aware of, particularly in municipal governments, school boards. They say, well, we're going to do an engagement and consultation. It's not an engagement and consultation at all. It is an education exercise. It is more or less like a indoctrination and propaganda opportunity. And to bring this home a little harder, you think, okay, well, individuals involved with colonialism. How many thousands of place names and building names is there anyone in the history of BC could be said to be not involved in colonialism? This is a scorched earth approach. That is what this is all about, and I'll explain in a minute how this connects to the Cowichan decision, DRIPA, land claims. It's part of the psychological warfare that's going on to win over the hearts and minds of people to accept decisions and that seem on the face of it to be completely outrageous. So here's another thing from the document that is quite crazy. So it set out in the document things that they said were foundational truths and quote-unquote facts. They said, okay, this consultation document needs to be considered, and the whole process needs to accept, and they laid out a whole bunch of facts. Well, one of the facts, series of facts they laid out, related to racism. So the first thing they did is they defined racism. Here's their definition of racism. They say, race is a social construction of human difference, typically based on characteristics such as skin color, hair texture, and facial features. It is not a biological fact, but rather a socially constructed concept created and maintained to establish disparities in the distribution of resources and power. So, the townsfolk are coming into a room to consult, and they're thinking that they're going to be listened to and say, hey, I feel that this name change is being foisted upon us. I like the name. This is my community. I feel comfortable with the name. I'm not comfortable with the name change. Well, by just entering the room, they have to accept that they're racist and that they have to kind of swallow whole this, what is effectively critical race theory and other Marxist postmodernist thinking. So the entire process of changing the name isn't just about reconciliation with First Nations people. That's how it's sort of sold initially. Okay, this is about reconciliation. We need to consider changing the name, yada, yada, yada. But no. The facts. You say, hey, everybody, sit down here. We're going to teach you the facts. The fact is, race is a social construction. Nothing to do with, it is not a biological fact. I mean, think about that for a minute. Many First Nations in this country, to obtain membership in said First Nations, you have to disclose a blood quantum in order to become a member. Well, what is that quantum? A quarter? A half? Or 1/8? Strictly speaking, under the Indian Act, blood quantum doesn't come into it. But individual bands, they can stipulate blood quantum. So, well, if race is not a biological fact, well, why does blood come into it? I mean, it's so preposterous. It does not square with the thinking of average people. This is sort of an elitist belief amongst the comrades who are in control of the woke regulatory bodies that, I mean, people call it ideological capture. It's a real thing. So this is the problem with consultation, and the more people stand up and become aware of what this supposed consultation and reconciliation process is about. Reconciliation is a real thing. It does mean something, but the meaning is being corrupted and changed into something else as a Trojan horse, if you will, to push into society a completely different ideology. So what happens is the ideological shift takes place to sort of make people more palatable to land claims. So just a little bit about the Tla'amin. It's sort of a good a test case of what's going on in the rest of the province. So what used to be called the Tla'amin First Nation, now the Tla'amin, they signed a treaty with the BC government in 2016 after decades of negotiation, and that set out all kinds of things: lands, responsibilities, governance. They have to have a democratically elected, there has to be all these democratic processes in place, and it's all in a constitution that had to be ratified. It was very controversial, but in the treaty, it did not prevent the nation from initiating further land claims. And that's exactly what they did. They have filed what's called a specific claim with the Specific Claims Tribunal, which is different from going to court to get a constitutional declaration of Aboriginal title. The Specific Claims Tribunal hears cases that are purely monetary, usually in nature, that are $150 million and below. But the Tla'amin is also a good example of the kind of secretive negotiations that are going on with the David Eby government. So Powell River is famous for its pulp mill, and it was shuttered a few years ago. And the question is, well, what are they going to do with this facility? So the owner of the pulp mill, Domtar, it was announced last year with great fanfare by Eby and Domtar and the First Nation that a deal had been reached whereby the Tla'amin would get a significant chunk of the mill site. So the question is, well, what were the terms of this deal? So I did some digging. I sent an email to the head of public relations for Domtar. I asked a series of questions. I said, well, what, if any, compensation was paid to Domtar? And who paid that compensation? What were the specific financial details of the transaction? And can you fill me in? No response. No return email. I said, hey, could I have the courtesy of a reply to my email? No reply. So who knows what amount of money was paid by taxpayers for the Tla'amin to end up with that territory. So you can see how it all is working together. So you got to change the name. So we talked about cultural rights. When you go for someone's culture, it's kind of like a punch in the nose. It's like, bam, take that. Your town's name is evil. You like your names, the name of your town? Well, boom, take that. We're changing it. Too bad if you don't like it. We're just going to change it. And if you don't like it, you're a racist. So what happened in Powell River was that a group of very feisty people, many of them with a lot of gray hair, retired people, because as we discussed before, the people who are not of retirement age face this risk of cancel culture, being literally kicked out of their jobs, as did happen to Ted Vizzuti, the paramedic. So what did they do to achieve this result? They simply just didn't quit. They realized that political pressure and a very carefully strategized way of going about it, they simply said, well, we just want to vote on this, which should be democratic. And it should be known that the provincial government, the decision to change a name is not at the municipal level. The municipality can request a change, but that change has to go up the chain to the legislature. And the Eby government has indicated somewhere that they're now much more open to changing the names of towns. So they're predisposed. So if this had gotten from the city level to the provincial level, it would likely have been just a rubber stamp in Victoria, because this is the agenda of the NDP. They want the province to be decolonized. I mean, heck, we're in a place called Sapperton. Who were the sappers? The sappers were the Royal Engineers. Well, that's colonial, isn't it? Moody Park, well, he's colonial. Douglas College. What? He's a figure of colonial history. How dare they name their Douglas College? Douglas Road. There's a million places called Douglas. Are we going to be changing that? So finally, I'll leave you with this. This is a key situation this year. It is 2026, and October 17th, there's going to be municipal elections. A lot of the woke decolonization strategies are playing out at the local level. School boards. They're basically indoctrinating our kids about, as early as grade 1, hey, by the way, your ancestors were racist, who stole First Nations culture, and you're living on stolen land, and we committed a genocide, and you should be ashamed. Like grade 1. So the curriculums, the ways of people are, the shaping of the future is happening at that level. So, and then at the municipal level, they have a lot of power. Here in New Westminster, we talked about how they scrubbed the Royal City moniker, they changed the logo. They want to decolonize everything. So the lesson from Powell River is that if people want to see change, or they're not happy with what's happening, they have to mobilize and organize themselves. They did petitions, they did mailouts, they did their own surveys. They collected data. They were very strategic about it. They talked to the ratepayers, they talked to this, they had their own Facebook groups, but all the while, they're being labeled as horrible white supremacists, fascists, and residential school denialists, and basically the scum of the earth. So they had to weather that. So if there's going to be change, people need to think about this local election cycle and think, well, I'm not just going to sit on my hands. Find a candidate, or maybe even run. And we're going to the video that is going to be part of this broadcast from the City Council chamber was submitted by someone in Powell River named Diane Sparks. So it's rumored that Diane Sparks might throw her hat in the ring to run for City Council.
It's our property. We own it. We're the taxpayers. We own it.
There's causing a disturbance or some sort. I don't know what, but you've been asked to.
Is everybody going to stay?
Yes. Yes, we're staying.
Paid for this today.
We got a whole stuff coming up, and we're going to stay.
No, we're going to stay. Everybody wanting to stay? Everybody prepared to stay or go out in handcuffs? Nope.
All
right, I guess we're all prepared to stay. Sorry. No disrespect, sir, but we have a right as taxpayers to stay here and watch council. That's our civic right.
Yep, I understand.
And Ted Vizzuti, also rumored to be making a council run. He was literally escorted out of the council chambers last night by RCMP. Now, and this is another thing I'll leave you with. The dust up with the RCMP wasn't even about the name change. It was about something else to do with an organization called the Foundation, which is a youth social services organization. The problem was they were trying to transfer like $250,000 from a special reserve, which seemed to be a huge chunk of cash. There was lack of consultation. They were very upset about this sort of rushed big money flow over to an organization that might not align with the values of the city and their approach to safe supply. And there's a huge problem with activist organizations and advocacy organizations getting lots of money flowing in. So that's the message, is that it's much more radical than they let on. It's Basically, you have to accept and swallow whole critical race theory. And you have to accept that everyone associated with colonialism is on the slate, on deck for cancellation. Everyone. That's their starting point. That's what they think should be the outcome. And that's really just a part of a anti-capitalist philosophy. So there's a saying in the anti-racism community, you can't be anti-racist if you're not anti-capitalist. Well, you can't be anti-capitalist if you're not anti-colonialist. These things are all, so if you're anti-colonial, decolonial, you're against capitalism. So what is capitalism? It's just basically the free enterprise system that upholds the whole society. That is this system of oppression that is creating all this injustice in the world. The people who really drink the Kool-Aid on the decolonial narrative, they believe that the overdose crisis is because of colonialism. And so we need to, the Indigenous Relations Advisor for New Westminster said, we have to detox from colonialism. This guy Maynard Harry, who said white people are subhuman, runs a seminar called Colonizer Rehab. Like we're basically out of control addicts who need to go through a 12-step program to finally find. This is all part of the gaslighting that we talked before. So that's the news. Powell River, significant victory. Name change not proceeding until after the election. My name is David Brett. If you like our work, please consider supporting us on our webpage, newstimes.com. Up in the right-hand corner, there's a little button that says support our work. If you would be so inclined, we would really appreciate your support. We do have cost. It is not free to do what we do. So thanks again for watching.